Has your doctor been lying to you? And would you know it if he were? My next guest on the Hunger Hunt Feast podcast had to ask himself that question as a doctor, giving his patients the standard dietary recommendations, and himself being pre-diabetic, obese, topping the scales at over 290 pounds, he knew something had to change. Join me as I talk to Dr. Ken Berry about the proper human diet and his new book, Lies My Doctor Told Me. Welcome back to the Hunger Hunt Feast podcast. Joining me today is Dr. Ken Berry, author of Lies My Doctor Told Me. Welcome, Dr. Berry.
Thanks for having me, Zane.
I appreciate you coming on here, joining us. I loved your book. Got through it on Audible and bought the paperback. I like to use that for reference, go back and forth.
Yeah, I do that too.
There's so much good stuff in there, and I like how you wrote it with you can go chapter by chapter looking for the particular purpose or the particular topic, or you can read it straight through and just get the whole. It flows well, but you can really go back for reference, and I found that it made it really easy to go back for reference to each topic. But with the overall, I think it sounded like your overall charge was the proper human diet. How should we be eating?
Yeah. And
the lies, as it's called, lies my doctor told me, the lies that we've all been told about how to eat, how we're supposed to live, what is actually dangerous for us, what is actually good for us. And it would appear we've been limiting what the things we should be embracing and embracing the things we should be limiting.
Yeah, exactly right. And there are many, many reasons why that is. There are many financial motivations in the powers that be. There are ethical motivations, whether their ethics are well-founded or not. There are just fads that have started in academia and in big food production that it would be very expensive to retool and say, we got all that wrong, so we're just going to tear all that down and start again. For example, Kellogg's, huge multi-billion-dollar corporation. If they were to say, there is actually a proper human diet and it does not contain any of our pseudo food products, you can see that would be a huge catastrophe for them. So they are not going to fund anything
right
that would tend to tear down the huge financial structure that they built, regardless of why Dr. Kellogg started telling people to eat cereal every morning. And I don't know, that's a very interesting story. If anybody wants to really step outside their bubble and find out, well, why did he come up with cornflakes in the first place? Just Google that and you will go down a rabbit hole that you quickly will wind up shaking your head and saying WTF.
Right. I'm familiar. Yes. He had his own ideas about how humans should behave, I believe. Yeah. It was trying to suppress certain behaviors.
Certain primal behaviors, right?
Exactly.
And I've been working on this paradigm for a few years, and I think the book is testimony to this paradigm. But basically, a long time ago, a very smart man said that if you come to me with an extraordinary claim, then you are required to have extraordinary evidence to back up that claim. That makes sense. That common sense, that makes sense. Even from a scientific level, if you come with some extraordinary claim, then you better have some damn good evidence to back that up. And so each chapter of the book is about basically a claim that either medical science, research science, or nutrition science has made. But then they don't back it up with any substantial research whatsoever. And so the common sense and the paleoanthropology of it, that would be just kind of the status quo. So what have human beings as Homo sapiens sapien eaten for the last 200,000 years, 250,000 years? Well, we know that actually. We can actually go back and determine that with stable carbon and nitrogen isotope analysis. So in the paleoanthropological community, that's not up for debate. We know without a doubt, that human beings ate as much fatty meat as they could get their hands on. They killed the biggest, fattiest animal they could. They ate all of it. They ate the organs. They ate the brain. They ate the bone marrow. They ate everything. And then they boiled the bones or roasted them over a fire to get even more nutrition out. If they were hungry or starving, then they would eat plants. Of course, yeah, we would eat shoe leather if we're starving, right?
Right.
So with that being said, then when the nutrition industry comes at us and says, oh, you should avoid saturated fat, you should not eat much meat, it causes cancer and it causes heart disease, you should eat lots of whole grains, you understand that's an extraordinary claim, because you're basically saying that human beings have been eating wrong for our entire existence as a species on this planet. And if you want to go back to hominids, which we can also tell what they ate, our distant ancestors, as hominids, we've been eating meat for 2.4 million years. But now you're coming in the 1960s and 70s and 80s with this extraordinary claim that eating meat is bad for you. You should limit meat. You should never eat fatty meat. Definitely don't eat bacon. That's an extraordinary claim. So you better have some really good, randomized, controlled, powerful research studies to back that claim up, or you just need to shut up, because all you're putting forth at that point is a weak hypothesis. And that's what all of these things are that we've basically been deluded into believing are scientific fact since about the 1950s or 1960s.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that brings me to, I mean, you and I are about the same age. And so when you went through med school and you were going through college, as I was, it was all about the low fat. Okay. We heard low fat growing up.
Yeah.
78 on 1980 on. So how did you get here? I mean, tell me a little bit of your backstory. How'd you come from coming out of med school with probably the standard education on what you're supposed to recommend, and you are now here quite on the opposite end of the nutrition spectrum? Yeah.
So I was taught in med school, and so I had a 1 hour semester, 1 or 2 hour semester course in the second year of medical school about nutrition. And it taught us a great deal about how to nutritionally supplement or feed someone who had been in a severe accident and they were comatose in the ICU, or they'd been in a house fire and, had 3rd-degree burns over 50% of their body, and they were in the burn unit. We got very good education about how to feed those people and keep them from starving and developing vitamin and mineral deficiencies. But when it came to the care and feeding of just a human being walking the street, just a man or a woman with a kid and a dog and a job, we got the absolute worst education on how to feed that person for optimal health, because we all want optimal health, right? So I can sum up my entire medical school nutrition education for quote unquote healthy people as eat lots of whole grains, avoid saturated fat, and jog. That literally was the entirety of my medical school nutrition education for a relatively normal human who was not in the intensive care unit. And so I applied that to myself and finished my med school, finished residency. I worked as an emergency room physician for several years at the beginning of my practice, started a small practice, which grew very, very quickly. And during the process of all that, I was eating a predominantly plant-based diet, but I got fat. I got pre-diabetic. I got severe reflux. I have rosacea. You can't tell it by looking at me now, but then it was terrible. I had to put a steroid cream on every day. I had joint pains. I had a knee injury playing basketball in high school, college. That hurt every day. I was miserable. I was depressed. I was anxious. I felt miserable. And so at my highest weight, I was 297 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Morbidly obese. And so you can imagine, and I'm in a small town in Tennessee, and you live in Tennessee, so you can understand the social nature of this. When a fat doctor walks in your room and says, "Now, Mr. McGillicuddy, you need to cut back and lose a little weight." And a lot of people who don't live in the South, they're like, well, but no, in the South, we're very common sense. 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to walk in my room and tell me to lose weight and it looks like the shirt button over your belly button is about to pop off and put my eye out at any minute.
Exactly.
That's number one, comical. Number two, farcical. And number three, you're not being genuine. You obviously don't know what the hell you're talking about, doctor. So how are you going to tell me? And so I quickly realized when I would say to people about their weight, and I would see their eyes glance down at my belly and then back up to make eye contact again.
Oh no!
I was like, yeah, this is not going to work for me. And so I went back and reread my nutrition textbook. I went to the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, because I was a pre-diabetic at that time. I had an A1C of 6.1. So I was quickly about to become a type 2 diabetic. So I thought, well, I'll eat the ADA diet and the AHA diet, some conglomeration of those, and start jogging. And so I did that. No saturated fat, tons of whole grains, lots of fruits, fruit juices, fruit juice smoothies, and start jogging. And so
at 300 pounds, you're jogging.
Almost 300 pounds, and I'm trying to jog. That's right.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah, you can imagine the knee pain with that, with all those inflammatory foods, and then jogging on top of it. So after about a month or two of that, I gained another 5 pounds. And so it was at that point that I had the epiphany. Dude, not only do you not know what the hell you're talking about, but your professors who taught you, they also don't know what they're talking about, because I had checked all my lab work multiple times every 6 months. And I knew that I didn't have any kind of insulin secreting tumor or endocrine cancer. I didn't have there was nothing wrong with me. I didn't have any genetic defect. And I was following the guidelines to the letter and was getting fatter. And so there was no other option except they're just wrong. And therefore, by proxy, you're wrong as well. So I had to go back to the drawing board, and I had to figure out what are humans supposed to eat, because this ain't it. And I read a book called The Primal Blueprint by Mark. And I read a book called The Paleo Diet by Lauren Cordain. And I read a book called The Atkins Diet Revolution. And all three of these books kind of agreed with each other on at least a foundational level, but they disagreed with everything I was taught in medical school, everything that the ADA and the AHA taught. They disagreed with. And I thought, well, I mean, what's it going to hurt to try it for a month or two? Obviously, I'm getting fatter by the minute. I'm going to be a diabetic in 6 months or a year. I might as well give this a try. And so I kind of implemented a combination of those three diets and immediately started to lose weight. My A1C, which is a marker of your average blood sugar, that started to come back down to normal. My triglycerides, which are sky high, started to come back down to normal. My reflux started to get a little better. And I'm like, what? Because at my heaviest point, I was taking 2 Nexium every single day. When the drug rep brought the Nexium samples, the patients didn't get those. I got those because my reflux was so severe. And even 2 Nexium a day, I still had breakthrough that I had to take Tums for. And so that started to get better. And my knee felt better, even though I hadn't had surgery or anything. Nothing had changed. It just didn't hurt as much. And I thought, well, heck, I'm going to do this for another month or two then. I mean, I didn't die and I feel better, so maybe I should just keep doing this. So as months went by, I continued to lose fat. I stopped the jogging because my knee was killing me, but then the knee felt better. So I started playing a little pickup basketball here and there with the kids, started, going for hikes in the woods, kind of doing more ancestrally appropriate stuff that I'd learned from Mark Sisson's book, The Primal Blueprint. Mm-hmm. And everything kept getting better. I slept better. And then a couple of things that I never would have guessed diet was related to at all was that my general depressed mood started getting better. And my anxiousness about every single damn thing, every day, every minute of the day, that got better as well. And I attributed it, maybe I'm sleeping better. I don't know, but something's making it better. And so that's kind of and then I kept reading and kept learning, because I think that's what a lifelong teacher should be, is also a lifelong student. And so I started looking at paleo. I did that for a few years. It was okay, but it wasn't what keto was. When I discovered the ketogenic way of eating, that's really when it took me to the next level. And I reversed just about everything. On keto, my heartburn was 80 or 90% better. No knee pain whatsoever. My A1C was back to normal. I was wearing pants that I had not been able to wear for years because they were they'd been washed in hot water and gotten way too tight. Well, now they fit again. And so all these things were happening because of this diet. And I kept checking my lab values every 6 months, and I wasn't dying. There was no, there was no negative repercussions from this diet. So I initially looked at keto as kind of a 3-month hack, and I actually started recommending it to my most morbidly obese patients. And I would say, look, you're on the schedule to have gastric bypass. Why don't you just, it's going to be a 3 or 4 month wait. Why don't you try this keto in the process? All you have to do is eat all the beef, butter, bacon, and eggs you can hold, and then throw some veg in if you're still hungry. And they're like, you mean I can eat all the beef, butter, bacon, and eggs I want? I'm like, yes, all you want. And, every guy's immediately like, hell yeah, I'll do that.
Exactly.
And the women were like, I don't know, that sounds like a lot of meat. But then they would go ahead and try it too. And they would wind up coming back and with the same kind of report. My mood's better. My blood sugar's better. I'm losing fat. I had one guy who was on the roster to have his knee replaced. He weighed like 450 pounds. And after 3 months, when he came back, he said, I called the knee surgeon and I canceled the knee replacement because my knee doesn't hurt anymore. Mm. He had not lost all his weight. I mean, he had lost 50 or 60 pounds, but not enough. If you thought that mechanical loading was the problem with his knee, he hadn't lost enough weight to change that equation much. But what he had done is decrease the inflammation. And so I kept recommending this way of eating for more of my patients. And so if you had a BMI of 30 or above, I started recommending it to you. And eventually I recommended it to every single one of my patients because the more I looked into the research and the more I learned, the more I realized what I was rediscovering and helping my patients to discover was what I now call the proper human diet. Human beings are by design we're designed to be low carbohydrate animals. We're not meant to eat a high carbohydrate diet. When you feed us that diet, we get sick and we get fat and we get diabetic and we get fatty liver. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of my evolution from being just a standard doctor that told you to join the gym and join Weight Watchers to who I am now, who understands that 99% of the chronic disease and chronic suffering of every human is caused by their diet.
Definitely starts there, doesn't it? I mean, that's the and it seems to be the solution to. Yeah,
and I know there are other factors that contribute. There's no doubt.
Yeah,
but the foundation, the bedrock of human health is your diet. Is if you're eating what you're meant to eat, what you're designed to eat, what you evolved to eat, then you're going to have optimal health. And then you can worry about exercise and sleep and stress and all these other things. But the foundation of everything is you've got to eat the proper human diet or nothing else works.
Correct. Absolutely. I love hearing an MD say this. It's awesome. It's awesome to hear. So just on a personal level, I mean, it sounds like you're nearly carnivorous, or what we call a carnivore.
Yeah.
So what is that? If you don't mind sharing, what does that look like? Because you're obviously of a very healthy weight now. Looking at you through a screen, and you look athletic, actually. So no one would guess that you were at one point 290 plus pounds. What does that look like? You have meat at every meal. How much do you probably don't weigh or measure macros? I'm guessing you just kind of eat by feel or.
Yeah. So meat makes up the majority of my diet now.
Okay.
And I think that the more I learn about this and the more I get feedback from the thousands of people who interact with me on social media, it seems like everyone does better on a diet that has as its anchor, the majority of your plate should be filled with some fatty meat, whether that's fatty seafood or fatty red meat. I don't think it makes much of a difference for most people. Mm-hmm. But the U.S. federal government My Plate, which shows 2/3 of your plate covered with vegetables, 1/3 with fruit, and then a 1 ounce sliver of meat. That's first of all not based on any research whatsoever, and secondly, it doesn't even make any sense when you consider our paleoanthropological origin, right?
Right.
So like today, I broke my fast at about 2 p.m. with 2 pounds of fatty ground beef. I never get the lean beef. I get the 70/30. I had 6 egg yolks with maybe 2 whites. And I had probably an ounce of onion finely chopped, and I put into the eggs, scrambled the eggs, and then crumbled up the beef and made kind of a frittata with that. And that was my first meal of today. And so you can see immediately I also go intermittent fast every single day. I think that's all a very powerful tool.
Absolutely.
I may eat again tonight, but I may not eat again tonight. I will let my hunger decide that. I won't let boredom decide that. I won't let stress decide that. If I get truly physiologically hungry again later this evening, I might eat a second meal. But if I don't get hungry, it will not occur to me to eat. And so that's how I eat every day. And you mentioned that I look a bit athletic. Well, here's the secret. I'm going to reveal a secret on Zane's podcast. I seldom work out.
Oh, well.
And that freaks people out when I say that. They're like, there's no way you could weigh 228 pounds and look like you do and not work out. And I'm telling you, the last time I went to the gym and worked out for an hour, it's been years ago.
Wow.
I don't enjoy working out. Now, I enjoy working. I'll take my chainsaw out on the farm and I'll cut down trees and drag brush, or I'll play with the kids in the yard. I love being active, but as far as, I got to put in my hour at the gym, no, that never happens. And I think when you are eating on the spectrum of the proper human diet, that is much less necessary to look like you want to look and feel like you want to feel. Now, if you want to get jacked and swole, you're going to have to spend time in the gym. No doubt about that.
Sure.
But if you want to be slim and hold a normal human amount of muscle, I don't think that working out is mandatory. I just don't think it is. And I think there are enough people out there who don't work out who look fine. And I'm not saying that's the healthiest way. I'm just saying that is an option for people who hate to work out. But what most people find is when they go keto or carnivore and they lose the bulk of their weight, all of a sudden they want to work out. They want to go for a play ball. They want to go for a swim. They want to jog. They want to lift weights because they feel so much better. Now they're actually able to do those things, whereas before it was pure torture to even try to do that.
Yeah, they have the energy to do it. They have reduced inflammation. Their metabolism actually functions like it's supposed to. They're creating energy instead of creating fat.
Yep. And they have the improved mood.
Yeah.
Because when you're depressed and anxious all day, every day, it's really hard to think about the future. All you're trying to do is get through today. But when you've got this new optimistic outlook, which comes from the reduced brain inflammation of eating on the proper human diet spectrum, you can actually think about the future and you can plan and you can daydream again and you can and also actually believe that those daydreams might come true one day and that you might actually go to the damn gym one day and you might actually, go for a canoe ride on the river. Whereas before you're like, blah.
Right. Absolutely. You mentioned rosacea earlier. So you're saying your rosacea cleared up and you believe that
and so back then I would have to use a pretty strong steroid cream at least 3 times a week to keep my rosacea where it wasn't just blatantly obvious. And I didn't want to overuse the steroid and get thinning of my skin, but I used just enough so it wasn't too obvious. But I haven't put a steroid on my face in 2 or 3 years now, and I just don't have it's gone. And I'm sure if I went back to eating the pseudo food Franken diet that Kellogg's and Kraft and all those guys would love for me to eat, it would pop right back up.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned 2 pounds of meat too, and that's a substantial amount, I can understand why you may not be hungry again. So there's many times when you have a 22 or 24 hour fast, and then there's times when you let your hunger decide if you eat again that evening. So it might be more of a 16, but it's still all very protein. So you're not worried about a protein to fat ratio. You're not, in other words, you're not over measuring, you're not overthinking. You're not trying to say I have this is 20% versus 80% of this. And you're basically eating food. You're looking at, this is the food I'm meant to eat. Yep. You're eating a portion that satisfies you. If you get hungry later, you eat. If you don't sweat it. It sounds a very, very, there's not a whole lot of stress in the way you.
Exactly. It's effortless because what I'm able to do now, and don't get me wrong, In the past, I definitely could not do this. Back when I was eating a high carbohydrate diet full of habit forming grains and habit forming sugars, I had to eat every 2 to 3 hours during the day. I literally snacked all day long at the clinic, along with lunch and dinner and a bedtime snack. I was snacking constantly. But now I'm free from the slavery of constant hunger. And so I literally don't think about food, and I work or I play. And sometimes those two things are the same thing for me because I really enjoy what I do. And so every now and then I'll be just working away or reading or doing something. And I'm like, something keeps aggravating me. What is, I'm hungry. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, hunger. So then I'll go and I'll eat a species appropriate
I love
diet,
it.
which is lots of fatty meat, maybe a little veg, maybe not. And then I'll get back to what I was doing. And so your hunger is just like thirst. It's just like oxygen deprivation. When you've got plenty of oxygen in your atmosphere, you don't think about breathing at all, do you, Zane?
No.
How many times have you breathed in the last minute? Are you tracking that?
Not really counting, though.
How do you know you're not going to develop an oxygen deficit if you don't track? You see my point?
I love it.
It kind of becomes silly. You're like, I don't track that. Have you tracked your urine output? I mean, you could be dehydrated. No? You see what I'm saying?
I do.
When you feed this elegant, wise human body that you have, all of us have that body. Right now, you might think your body's your worst enemy, but I promise you it's because you've misfed that body. When you feed this elegant human body the proper human diet, it takes care of all that for you. You don't have to monitor your heart rate. You don't have to monitor your fat to protein ratio. You don't have to monitor your macros. You don't have to drink a gallon of water every damn day because that guru said to. If you're thirsty, you drink. If you're hungry, you eat. If you develop a carbon dioxide buildup, you breathe. You just do those things. You don't have to think about them. That's why we have a brain stem, is to take care of all that. None of that stuff should be occupying effort from your frontal cortex. That's not what your frontal cortex is for. If you're plotting out and tracking and measuring and doing all this stuff, you're wasting all this frontal cortex real estate that you could be using to enjoy your life and improve your life. That's what your brainstem is for. That's why you don't have to remember, oh shit, I haven't breathed. I need to hang on, Zane. I need to breathe. We don't do that. We don't have to. The same applies for your fluid status, for your food status, for your acid-base balance. All that stuff is taken care of by your brainstem if you're feeding your body the proper human diet.
Because at that point, your hormones are in check. I mean, obviously, if you were listening to your body before, but your hormones were telling you something different, you're up and down on the roller coaster, you're eating every 2 or 3 hours. But once you started, so what was that transition? I mean, obviously change can come in layers. Right. You can't, very few people could in a week go from where you were to where you are now. That'd be almost like militaristic.
It'd be torture and it would be impossible. Yes.
Right. So what kind of transition did that look like for you? I mean, what was that month? Was that year?
So it literally looked like going from the American Diabetes Association recommended diet to going to a more primal paleo diet. And I stayed there for probably 2 years.
Okay.
And then a ketogenic diet where I stayed for probably 3 or 4 years. And then, you've probably heard about this crazy guy, Sean Baker.
Oh yeah,
ribeye, right?
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's great.
And he's a beast.
But he's on to something. And so, based on his research and his and I interaction, we've done multiple lives together, and I've met him at conference a few times. I said, "Well, how is that possible? How is it possible that Sean Baker's eaten nothing but meat for years? How does he not have a vitamin C deficiency? How does he poop? He has no fiber in his diet whatsoever. How's that possible? Shouldn't he get constipated and swell up and die? Mm-hmm. No, he looks great. He's very healthy. He's very strong. How's that possible, Zane?" And that's the kind of question people should be asking. When you see somebody like that, you say, how's that possible? Then you start reading and researching. And that's really the main reason that I started to delve into paleoanthropology, which is now my favorite pastime, is reading paleoanthropology, because we know all these things as a human society,
Mm-hmm.
but not all of us know these things, right? And one of the main things that doctors do that's a terrible practice is they stay in their lane. And if you're going to be a good doctor, you cannot stay in your lane. If you're a family practice like me, or internal medicine or pediatrics, you cannot just stay in your family practice lane and read your literature and ignore everything else. You're gonna be blind to so many things that you could have access to help your patients. And it was only when I started reading paleoanthropology, graduate level paleoanthropology, that I found out, I discovered, so we've known for decades that the human species and hominids in general ate as much fatty meat as they could get their hands on. I mean, there are some fatty animals that are now extinct because we literally hunted them to extinction.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And we didn't just eat the muscle meat. We ate like you mentioned before, we ate the organs.
Right. Yeah, and there's good
anthropological
evidence now that our first foray into eating animals was we would come upon a carcass that had been freshly killed. And by fresh, I mean a few days or a few weeks old. And we learned how to take giant rocks and smash the large bones and get the marrow, and smash the skull and get the brains. Because hyenas and lions, they typically can't do that. They just eat the meat and move on, eat the organs and move on.
Right.
But we learned how, and that was probably the first tool that humans ever used, was a big rock to smash open an elephant skull or to break an elephant femur to get to the fat content. And so now that I know that, you see how that completely changes everything for me as a doctor. Because when some vegan cardiologist says, well, humans aren't designed to eat meat, like, I know instantly that this guy, although he's well-meaning, he's earnest, he's honest, he's trying to do a good job, he literally has no damn idea what he's talking about.
Mm.
He just is uninformed and ignorant. But even though I'm not questioning his motives, he's trying to help people in the best way he currently knows how. I used to do that same thing back when I was morbidly obese. I thought I was right, but obviously I wasn't. And so once a doctor steps outside their lane and starts to read other specialties and starts to read other scientific literature, it gives you a circumspect view of this, and it becomes very hard for somebody to come up with an extraordinary claim like, that sun exposure causes skin cancer. You're like, what the hell are you talking about? What are you basing that on? And I got a chapter in the book about that.
Yes.
It's ridiculous to say that getting a healthy tan will increase your risk of skin cancer. That's the dumbest thing ever. We've been playing naked in the sun for 2.4 million years. But starting in 1970, the sun is now very dangerous. And don't bring up the ozone. I cover that in the book. If you think that there's a hole in the ozone layer now, and that's what the problem is, I cover that as well.
Right. Oh yeah. Equatorial. Well, like you mentioned, the range from the equatorial to the polar.
Yes.
There's there are plenty of people that live at the equator who have less skin cancer than those of us who are eating McDonald's in Nebraska. Yeah.
Actually, the further you move away from the equator, the higher the risk of skin cancer. Now, if it were the sun, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, because from reading the book that the UV exposure at the equator is thousands of times higher.
Correct.
Than the UV exposure in Norway or Sweden or Finland. But the higher you move towards northern latitudes or southern latitudes, the rate of skin cancer goes up. So it obviously has nothing to do with the sun. Perhaps it's something that we're eating.
Yeah. Well, and I'd love to dig into that, because as you said, in the book, we turn over our skin cells. Our whole body's made of what we eat. We're constantly replacing cells in our body, including our skin. But we've been replacing, because of recommendations, we've been replacing saturated fat while some unsaturated fats are fine, like those in whole food, but we've been told to replace them with polyunsaturated cooking oils or seed oils for, like you mentioned, the 50s, 60s. Let's start with Crisco and margarine and move on to canola. And I mean, the inflammation, the oxidation. I mean, let's let's unpack that a little bit for.
Yeah, absolutely. So every cell in your body has a cell membrane. And we don't have cell walls because we're not plants. We only have a phospholipid bilayer cell membrane around every single one of our cells. And this phospholipid bilayer, you hear that one word lipid in there?
That's a fact.
It's rich in fatty acids and cholesterol. Every cell in your body, every membrane. Now, if you build a cell out of an inappropriate ratio of fats, then you wind up with a dysfunctional cell. That makes sense, right? If you build a car out of the wrong parts, the car is not going to run right. Mm-hmm. Human cells are the same way. And so if you're eating a diet that's very high in omega-6 fatty acids and very low in omega-3 fatty acids, you're going to actually be putting inappropriate fatty acids into your cell membranes. And that cell is going to be an inferior cell. It's going to be a dysfunctional cell. And we know in medicine that dysfunctional cells are more likely to develop cancer, right? Absolutely. Secondly, when you're eating a diet that's high in inappropriate carbohydrates like grains and sugars, drinking lots of fruit juice, that leads to inflammation in the body, and that leads to chronically high levels of sugar in your body. Cancer loves sugar, and inflammation increases your rate of cancer production. So now there are people out there that would say that actually putting on the chemical factory-made sunscreens may increase your risk of skin cancer as well. And I don't deny that, but I don't think that's the primary cause. I think the primary cause is people eating a diet that is a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6 fatty acids to omega-3 fatty acids. That's not the right ratio. That's not the proper human diet ratio. When we were in the wild, it was probably 1-to-3 or 1-to-4, omega-3 to omega-6. And so there's nothing wrong with omega-6 fatty acids in the proper ratio. But what we're getting when we eat McDonald's French fries fried in soybean oil, and when we use vegetable oil and canola oil at home, we're getting this huge, inappropriate amount of omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids that are inflammatory and lead to dysfunctional cell membranes. And that, in my opinion, I mean, that's not an extraordinary claim. That makes perfect sense when you kind of talk about the physiology and the biology of it. And I think some research will bear that out and show that to be exactly the case. But yeah, that's what I believe about that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the fear has been to move us away from cholesterol and heart disease, which, I mean, right. That's obviously, they finally lifted the ban on cholesterol, or the upper limit on cholesterol in 2015. I know you're associated, or you're very well connected with Nina Tickholz, who's trying to help petition to lift the limit on saturated fat. Yeah. You probably saw that Journal of American College of Cardiology study that just came out last week.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do a dual Facebook, YouTube live about that at 5:00 today.
Okay,
and kind of drop that on the world, because that's a huge domino, and the fact that the American College of Cardiology and their journal, which is considered by all doctors to be the preeminent heart journal in the world, they have said that there is no research to back up a claim that we should limit saturated fat in our diet. And it's about time. I never thought that would happen this soon. I think that's a testament to the power of social media and the power of people like you and I just not shutting up. Because if we hadn't been doing what we do, and everybody's sharing their keto success story with their doctor, and that number's in the hundreds of thousands now of people who are going to the doctor and saying, yeah, I reversed my diabetes and I got rid of my morbid obesity with keto. Mm-hmm. And, the first time the doctor hears that, he thinks you're a kook. But when he hears that from the 100th or the 200th patient, if he's got any common sense at all, he or she's going to say, what the hell is this keto? I bet I'm going to Google that tonight and see what that's all about, because I've got so many patients who are improving their health in ways that I couldn't do. And they're just doing it by eating this diet. What is this?
Right. That's completely contrary to what they've been recommending. I mean, I've actually heard stories from people where I think you should, this direction you should go, and I think you should try that. But they get pushback from their doctor because they do a blood test, and for whatever reason, their cholesterol numbers are up, or even though the triglycerides might be down, but their cholesterol number, their LDL weight, their LDL C is a little high, and so the doctor says, well, stop. And actually being told to stop doing it, even though it could be the best possible solution for their weight problem, for their triglycerides, for their blood sugar. And it's almost criminal. I mean, I know out of ignorance and out of good intention, but it's.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, what it is it's cognitive dissonance at its finest. A good example, Paul Mason, who's a low-carb keto doctor in Australia. He had a patient who was eating keto who reversed their morbid obesity, reversed their type 2 diabetes, got rid of their fatty liver, and a whole multitude of things that they corrected by eating what I consider to be the proper human diet. And so this person went back to their endocrinologist, who they see once a year for their diabetes and fatty liver and other stuff. And so Paul Mason actually posted the endocrinologist chart note on Twitter because the guy said, oh, this is an amazing transformation. I'm so proud of this patient, blah, 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 blah. Then he says, I would now recommend that they go back to eating the American Diabetes Association recommended diet to help prevent diabetes and heart disease.
Unbelievable.
Literally said that in his note with this patient sitting right in front of his own face. And now you can't, you say, well, is he an idiot? No, he's an endocrinologist. He's very intelligent.
Right.
Is he evil? No, he just literally looked the solution in the eyes and did not see what he saw. That's what happened. And I think that and that's what you and I are doing on a daily basis is that doctor had a paradigm.
Right.
That the ADA diet is the correct diet. You have to, that's his paradigm. And it's very hard for people to think outside their paradigm or their way of thinking. And so this guy, his paradigm is so strong that he was able to look a human being in the eye who had reversed everything that he was unable to reverse and recommended that patient go back to following his recommendations again.
It's mind blowing that someone obviously more intelligent than I am. I can clearly say I've met several people more intelligent than I am that can't look at that and see.
Yeah.
And so it's not, you're right. It's not intelligence. It's that it's the weight he places on the education he was given, which brings the question, how did we get here where our leading health experts, our RDs and MDs and CNSs and whatever else, the other letters you want to add, PhDs, Walter Willett and all the bunch at Harvard and the WHO, who pushing a no meat agenda, a soy based, protein. And how did we get here? Why was the food pyramid recommending 6 to 11 servings of grain and almost no meat and no fat? Where did the research go wrong? Because there's obviously scientists who were doing some level of research, or what was that research? And I love what you mentioned about the food frequency questionnaires, but I think it goes way beyond that. But let's unpack that.
Yeah, and so I think a large part of it is that many of the researchers, especially researchers at the Harvard School of Public Health, they are vegetarian or vegan, and they believe in their heart of hearts that they believe that's the proper human diet, that we should eat a plant-based diet, every now and then have some meat as a treat. Once a month, you can have an egg without the yolk. That sort of thing. They believe that diet. They believe that it's moral. They believe it's ethical, and they believe that it's healthy, despite the fact that it's not nutritious. It's not a species-appropriate diet that humans have ever eaten before. Mm-mm. And so I think part of it is their ethical and moral belief system getting in the way. And that's why when we have research studies, we randomize them and we placebo control them and we double blind studies, because any researcher, no matter how ethical and how moral, their preconceived notions will slip into the research results if you don't randomize and control a study. It's been shown multiple times. The most moral and honest guy in the world, his belief will leach into the findings of his research if he does not double blind himself. We know this. That's why science works like it does. But yet when it comes to nutrition, we decided, well, actually Walter Willett decided, because he wrote the book on it, which I've got right here. that observational research, epidemiological research is when it comes to nutrition only, no other scientific field, but in nutrition, that is the most powerful research method of all. And the food frequency questionnaire, which is a multiple choice test of anywhere from 20 to 140 questions, that is the preeminent scientific instrument for doing nutrition research. And Walter Willett came up with the food frequency questionnaire. He perfected it. It's his baby. And so you can quickly understand this guy, I'm sure he's very earnest and honest, but his preconceived notions have slipped into all of the nutrition research that he's had a hand in. And indeed, every younger researcher who wanted to impress Walter Willett. They did not do a research study showing the benefits of eating bacon, because he would not have been impressed by that, and you have not got your research grant, and you would have been asked to leave the Harvard School of Public Health. If you had went to him and said, hey, I'd love to do a study about the health benefits of egg yolks, they would have said, that's great. You can do that at the University of Arizona because you ain't going to do it here.
Right.
And so it's partly that. And then it's partly just the cognitive dissonance that, these great guys who I have lots of respect for, Ansel Keys, all the big vegan doctors, Walter Willett, they all believe a plant-based diet is best. Who am I to disagree with that? I need to listen to them and learn from them, and then don't look for other options, because Walter Willett's obviously right. He's the chairman of the department at the Harvard School of Public Health. How much smarter can you get? Why would I question him? But the problem is Walter Willett has made all these extraordinary claims that human beings shouldn't eat meat and that human beings should eat lots of whole wheat grains, based on no research, based on these very, very weak epidemiological studies that the data was accumulated from food frequency questionnaires, which are basically multiple guess tests that you give to the participants of the study, sometimes only once in the whole 20-year study, maybe twice, maybe once every 5 years, you would let them retake this little multiple choice test. And then you crunch all those numbers and you pretend to find scientifically meaningful results in that. That's a farce. That's not science, but it has come to be accepted science in nutrition research because of Walter Willett and because of other people like him. It's now considered the state of the art, even though it's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Well, and as you've mentioned in the book, the influence of big ag and big food, there's a lot of money in selling or in increasing the amount of grains, recommended, for, as you mentioned with Kellogg. But I mean, Dr. Kellogg's long gone, but his legacy remains on the shelves of our grocery store in many different colored boxes. Some of those, not even just Kellogg's, but, with the cholesterol, the claim for improving cholesterol through these grains. So this big fear of cholesterol, which we've hopefully now all kind of overcome. But I mean, would you say that money played a part in the food pyramid and basically an industry funded research or industry funded recommendations?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I go into it in some detail in my chapter about the food pyramid. But Nina Teicholz destroys the food pyramid in her book, The Big Fat Surprise.
Absolutely.
So basically, once the federal government, the USDA, once their guys had gotten what they thought the food pyramid should look like, they turned it over to the lobbyists for the big food corporations and said, here, what do you think about this? So big agri, and when I say, big farming, I'm not talking about our buddy here in Davidson County or Rutherford County who, he farms 200 or 300 acres and, he barely gets by. I'm not talking about that guy.
Right.
I'm talking about Archer Daniels Midland. I'm talking about Cargill. I'm talking about those guys. That's who got their hands on the thing. And they said, and I think they were recommending 3 to 5 servings of whole grains a day. And they're like, that's not nearly enough. So they changed it to 6 to 11 servings a day. They changed everything and said, okay, there you go. Now you can publish it. And that's literally what got published.
Wow.
After the lobbyists for big food and big farming got hold of and changed it to suit their profit motive, gave it back to the federal government, the USDA, then it was published. That's a literal true story, and it's documented. And Nina does a great job in The Big Fat Surprise of just laying it out.
That was back in '78 when we got the pyramid. That's late '70s, yeah, with the whole George McGovern count committee. Wow, that's there we go. There we have the warping of the education of our RDs and MDs and our leading health authorities, who were butt heads with us over results. I mean, over like a lifestyle change that brings meaningful results. That's why the doctor you explained couldn't see it. What caught me in your book, and I have to admit I haven't Googled his story, but the man who wrote the foreword, Dr. Gary Fettke, what happened to him in Australia? Because I think it was quite a battle.
So, and his story is fascinating, and it's a life lesson for everyone. He was and is an orthopedic surgeon. And so orthopedic surgeons are bone and joint specialists. And so if you were in a car wreck and shattered your femur, he'd be the guy to either put it back together or put a rod in it or whatever needed to be done. He was spending an inordinate amount of his time in his practice in Australia chopping off diabetic toes and diabetic feet and diabetic legs.
Wow.
And I've actually assisted in these surgeries when I was in my residency. This is not a fun procedure at all. Now, jumping into the middle of a trauma case with an orthopedic surgeon and putting bodies back together, I can't think of anything that's much more fun than that and much more exhilarating and much more rewarding than that.
Sure.
But chopping off a piece of dead human meat that is putrid, it stinks, it's gross, it's disheartening to see that a part of this person's body just gave up and said to hell with it. And it's 100% because of their diet. And so Gary, as a doctor who was having to chop off these people's legs, you always start with a toe, and then you proceed to chop off more toes, and then you proceed to chop off the foot, then you go to below the knee, then you go above the knee. And usually at that point, the circulation's still good enough that you don't have to chop off more meat. And the circulation in the hands and fingers is much better than in the toes of diabetics. So you always start with a toe. And so what he started doing was when he would have a person come with a gangrenous toe from their out of control diabetes, he would tell them, if you just stopped eating sugar and grains and started eating more meat, I won't have to chop off any more of your body. And obviously the patients had a very high motivation to not have other parts of their body chopped off, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And
so they would do that. And so the dietitians in his area caught wind that he was doing this. And for whatever reason, he was recommending a meat-heavy diet. He was recommending that you don't eat lots of whole grains. And that was very offensive to the local nutritionists and dietitians. So they reported him. And I forget all the details, but it was a years-long court battle of him defending himself because he was saving his patients' toes and feet and legs. And what their argument was is you're not a nutritionist or a dietitian. You're not able to give this advice. You can't give dietary advice because you're not a dietitian.
Wow. And
so they were wanting to take his medical license away because he was giving dietary advice to his patients. Dietary advice that worked 100% of the time, mind you. But that was irrelevant because he was not qualified to give that advice. And so $1 million battle that took years, he finally won it. And he still advises patients when he has to chop off that toe to stop eating sugar, both added sugar and natural sugar, and stop eating grains. And they get to keep the rest of their toes. And now the dietitians leave him alone because he won that court battle and actually he forced them to give him a public apology.
Wow.
For what they did. And so, he's a huge hero of mine. And anybody who's interested in a very interesting story of human nature and the human will, you should read the story about Gary Fettke.
That is unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, as if they have a monopoly on nutrition, on what we should eat, and it definitely has been bought and paid for, as we've mentioned. Right. That as you mentioned, Nina Tickholz. I saw the YouTube video you guys did together. You have a tremendous YouTube portfolio, if you want to call it. I mean, you have just so much information on your YouTube channel. It's a wealth of information. I recommend anybody, everyone should go check it out, and topic by topic, just taking apart, well, a lot of what you cover in the book, but even more so, because when did you start that YouTube channel?
I started the YouTube channel about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. It's brilliant. I mean, it's very simple to understand for the average person. It's not heavy and deep in the weeds biology by any means. It's very straightforward, as I'm sure you intended.
Yes.
But the work of, like you mentioned, Nina and the Nutrition Coalition to currently petition the Dietary Guidelines Committee to lift that the limit on saturated fat. Well, really, what she's petitioning. I mean, that's how I interpret it. But what she's petitioning is that they actually use science, current science, to make recommendations.
Yeah, what a concept, right? You should either if you've got scientific evidence to back it up, then make a recommendation. But if you have no scientific data that's meaningful to back up your recommendation, then shut your mouth. Don't make a recommendation. Say, we currently don't know whether it's healthy or not. We have no idea. We need to do more research, but we haven't yet because Walter Willett won't let us. But as soon as he retires or dies and we're able to do some saturated fat research, then we'll offer a saturated fat guideline. That would you would, as just a rational human being, you would go, well, I get that.
Yeah.
I wish it was a guideline, but I'm glad that they're at least honest enough to say we have no damn idea. As soon as Walter Willett retires and we're able to do that research, we'll let you know. But they don't do that. They feel obligated to put out a recommendation based on just the most tenuous and ridiculous research, which when somebody like Nina looks into it, when somebody like Gary Taubes looks into the research, literally you walk away shaking your head like, what is wrong with human beings? How can we be so brilliant and so stupid at the same time? How is that possible in one head, in one human brain, to be brilliant and a moron at the same time? How does that possible? But it's very, very possible. That's the reason that we designed the scientific method the way we did, to protect us from that. And the reason we designed research studies the way we did is to protect the data from our own preconceived notions and our own current paradigm and our own cognitive dissonance.
Right.
And so I think it's a great compliment for a scientist or a doctor or a dietitian or a nutritionist for them to change their mind. And so a great example is Tim Noakes, who's a professor in South Africa. And for years, he's a runner, long distance runner. He recommended a high carb diet, avoid saturated fat. And he ran on carbs. I think he even wrote a book about that. He has completely done a 180 because he's a true scientist. He's able to put aside his current paradigm and put aside his preconceived notions and go, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And now he's an ardent low carb keto advocate. He's apologized for his previous books and his previous research, and he's writing new books about low carb and keto. And he's talking more and more about carnivore the more he learns. And so I think that's a huge testament to doctors and other professionals who are able to say, I don't know, but I'm trying to find out, or, hey, I was just wrong. And every time I get an opportunity, I apologize to all my patients from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago who I gave stupid nutrition advice. And I want to take this opportunity once again to apologize. I'm sure I caused harm. I'm sure I caused people to lose toes and to have heart attacks by recommending the idiotic American Diabetes Association diet and recommending Weight Watchers and recommending Jenny Craig and recommending the Biggest Loser diet. I'm sure I hurt people with that information, and I'm deeply sorry. And that's one of the reasons I'm so active on social media, is I'm trying to make up for the damage that I caused in the past.
Wow. That's a burden every MD bears, is that you hold people's lives in your hands. And that's
absolutely
not to be taken lightly.
You can quickly see, as long as I'm doing this and staying in my lane, right? I got my horse's blinders on. I'm staying in my lane. I'm not questioning anything. I don't know. I have no idea how wrong I am. And if I'm practicing according to community guidelines, then I'm never going to be in danger of getting censored by my medical board or by the licensing agency or by the American Association of whoever. Nobody's ever going to yell at me for following the guidelines. I'll never get in trouble for that. Even though I've never helped a single patient in my 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of practice, I'll never get in trouble. And so you can see how the average doctor who's not wanting to make a fuss, who's not wanting to, ruffle the bed sheet, so to speak, they're just going to keep their nose down and just keep prescribing the statin and keep prescribing this pill and that pill. They're not going to, if they talk about diet, they're going to hand you an American Diabetes Association handout. That's it. They're never going to think that through. They're never going to look at any kind of research in a meaningful way. And so they spend their entire career no good at all. And that's, right. I mean, if a doctor's honest, when they look up out of their trench and they see that they've had literally no meaningful effect for 20 years of practice, I mean, that's a suicidal moment. You can just imagine.
I can't imagine that pressure. And the United States has been really behind compared. We were one of the last to lift the daily limit on cholesterol. We're one of the last, with saturated fat, and thankful for these MDs and PhDs like Ron Krauss and Jeff Volek, who's been preaching keto and low carb performance for probably, almost a decade, I would think, or at least 7 or 8 years. Yeah, more than a decade. And so I'm thankful that it's starting to change in our country as well, because it shows that some of the grip of the industry, of the big pharma, as well as big ag, is starting to loosen, big food. But we know these, as you mentioned, that there's still resistance from the contracts in place that our government has based on our food pyramid and based on the plate for the military, for hospitals, elderly, schools. And so our most precious, commodities are subject to this, and the contracts in place are holding us there. So really, it's sad. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, for joining me. Again, the book is called Lies My Doctor Told Me, Medical Myths That Can Harm Your Health. Tell us where to find you, YouTube, website, and any events you've got coming up, any places where people can connect with you.
Yeah. So if you go to YouTube and search for Dr. Berry with an E, not an A, you'll find me. I have a Facebook page I'm pretty active on. Same thing, just search Facebook for Dr. Berry. I've also got, if you're feeling salty and snarky, then you can follow me on Twitter. If you're feeling loving and humanitarian, you can follow me on Instagram. I kind of let my mood dictate which social media I use that day. I'm even on TikTok and Vero. I try to be everywhere because, like I said earlier, I'm trying to undo past wrongs when I gave idiotic advice. I've got a lot of work to do. Also, in September of 2020, we were having a virtual Proper Human Diet Summit. And we actually have Professor Tim Noakes is going to be speaking, Dr. Michael Eads, Dr. Paul Mason, Dr. Tony Hampton. We've got a ton of other people there. We have about 12 speakers, including me. And there's still tickets available for that. And if you just go to a website, I think it's phdvirtualsummit.com. You can get tickets. They're only $37 because everything I do, I try to keep it as cheap as possible because I know people with jobs and spouses don't have a lot of money to waste. But I promise you, I'm going to make it worth your $37 if you attend this virtual conference coming up in September.
Okay, I will link to that in the show notes. I'll make sure we have that accessible to those who go through the show notes and check that out. And I'll put links to your social media as well. That was supposed to be in Nashville, was it not? You're welcome.
Yeah, we were going to have a live event, but thanks to the virus, which we won't name, that's no longer possible this year. Maybe next year, maybe in 2021, we can have a live event.
That'd be great because I'm right here in Nashville with you. So hey, and welcome to Nashville, by the way. I know you've recently relocated.
We love it.
Yeah. It's a great city. Well, again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm gonna make sure everyone knows how to find you and encourage them ongoing to connect on this summit, because that is a great way to find all of these experts in one place. And it was virtual. We can all be there, can't we?
That's right.
So thanks again. I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity of being on your podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.